All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really big one, a challenge that pretty much defines our era. How on earth do you govern a technology that's moving at exponential speed? So let's dive right in. This quote, it just gets right to the absolute heart of the problem, doesn't it? See, AI isn't like a new car or some new drug that you can just test in a lab under controlled, stable conditions. No way. It's more like a living thing, a constantly shifting landscape that completely redraws the map of what's possible, like every few months. And that, right there, is what we call the pacing paradox. The core of the issue is actually pretty simple when you break it down. Our ways of making rules, our whole system of governance, it was built for a slow, predictable world. But now it's up against a technology that's evolving exponentially. And that massive gap between those two speeds, well, that's where all the danger is. Okay, so first things first, let's really dig into why our old way of making rules, this, static, kind of outdated model, is just completely falling apart when it comes to AI. For decades, really, regulation has followed this same simple playbook. It's a three-step dance. First, you spot a problem. Then you measure how bad it could get. And finally, you write a rule to stop it. Simple, right? But here's the catch. This whole process is built on one giant assumption, that the thing you're measuring today is going to be the same thing you're regulating tomorrow. And this quote just illustrates the problem perfectly. I mean, trying to use that old motto for AI, it's literally like trying to map a coastline while the tide is rising all around you. You could take a picture, sure, but by the time you develop it, the water's already somewhere else. That map is useless the second you make it. So, okay, this old model is broken. But why exactly? Well, it fails for a few huge reasons. First off, the tech itself is always changing, which means the potential harms are a constantly moving target. Second, the risks don't just sit in a neat little box. They multiply, creating these crazy, unpredictable domino effects. And here's the real kicker. Because everything's moving so fast, by the time you actually write a rule, it's probably already useless. We saw this play out in real time with the EU's AI Act. They literally had to change their whole approach midstream because the technology was just leaving their original plan in the dust. So if the old goal, creating these perfect static rules for safety, is basically impossible, then what should we be aiming for? Well, the answer means we have to completely shift our thinking towards a brand new goal: resilience. So resilience, what does that even mean? Look, it's not about trying to prevent every single problem from happening. That's a fool's errand. Instead, it's about building systems, our social systems, our tech, our information ecosystems, that are strong enough to take a hit, to absorb a shock, adapt on the fly, and just keep going without a total collapse. Okay, let's make this really concrete. The old way of thinking, static safety, would ask a question like, will this specific chatbot lie? It's super focused, right? But the new way, systemic resilience, zooms way out. It asks a much bigger and, frankly, more important question. Let's just assume millions of chatbots are gonna lie. Does our society have the immune system, journalists, fact-checkers, a public that knows how to think critically, to fight back against that wave of misinformation? You see the difference? It's a total shift in perspective. All right, so resilience is the new goal. Great. But how do we actually do it? Well, that brings us to the toolkit, the practical tools we need for this new adaptive way of governing. First tool in the box, systems thinking. This is all about changing the questions we ask. We've got to stop asking, what's the probability of this one bad thing happening? Instead, the question has to be, okay, if this one part of the system breaks, where do the shockwaves travel? What else does it take down with it? How does it affect our infrastructure or public trust? It's all about the ripple effect. And this is the perfect way to think about it. We can't predict the exact size of the next wave, and we don't have to. What we can do is focus on strengthening the shoreline. We can figure out where we're vulnerable, where our critical systems are, and reinforce them so they can handle whatever wave comes crashing in. Okay, tool number 2 is strategic foresight. And let's be clear, this is not about trying to predict the one true future with a crystal ball. It's about getting ready for many possible futures. We do this with things like horizon scanning, basically looking for those tiny clues today that hint at the big disruptions of tomorrow. And we do it by stress testing our plans against all sorts of different scenarios, like what happens if compute power becomes almost free? What if it gets super restricted? The whole point is to build policies that are tough, that don't shatter no matter which future we end up in. I love this sports analogy because it just makes so much sense. Think about it. A great defender in any sport doesn't just chase the ball where it is right now. No, they anticipate. They position themselves to cover the zone where the ball's likely to go. That's exactly what we're talking about with adaptive governance. And this brings us to our third and maybe most important tool, the human circuit breaker. And look, this is way more than just having someone click an OK button on whatever the computer suggests. We're talking about a human in the loop who has the real authority to step in and say stop, to override the AI's decision based on human values, things like fairness or compassion, not just on cold hard data. And this quote just drives the point home. In a world that's becoming more and more automated, our ability to feel, to understand context, to show empathy, that's not some nice-to-have soft skill. It is a core safety feature. It's our moral emergency brake for when the data points in one direction but our human conscience is screaming at us to go the other way. So all of this, it's all building to a much deeper truth. Because after all this talk about AI and rules and tech, it turns out the real weak point, the biggest challenge we face, it isn't technical at all. It's us. Really, the single most important metric in this new era is something called our adaptation velocity. And what is that? It's basically the speed at which we can learn and respond. It's how quickly our institutions can see that something's changed, learn from it, and then actually do something effective about it. And you can even boil it down to a stark little formula. The risk we face is equal to the speed of the threat minus the speed of our governance. See, the risk isn't just the threat itself. The real risk is created in that gap between how fast the problem is moving and how fast we can respond. I mean, if it takes us 5 years to react to a problem that's evolving every 5 months, our system is fragile, period, no matter how good our intentions are. And this is where the real problem is. It's not in the silicon, it's in us. Our institutions, they were built for stability, not speed. Our trust in each other and in our systems, it's incredibly brittle. Our collective attention span is fragmented into a million pieces. And honestly, our ability to sit down and have a deep, thoughtful moral conversation, it's just way too slow for the speed of the tech. And that brings us to this really profound final idea. The future isn't going to be defined by how fast our machines can calculate. It's going to be defined by how fast we can grow in wisdom, together as a society. Which, of course, leaves us with the biggest question of all. This isn't just about building smarter AI or writing cleverer rules anymore. It's about building a better, faster, more resilient human system. So the real question, the one we all need to be asking ourselves, is this: how do we accelerate our own wisdom?